It's good to see you here. When we're talking about these emotions as we're going through this series, there's a rhyme and a reason. I want to be made like Jesus in every way, shape, and form, molding to his image. And that even means like these emotions that I encounter, these emotions that you encounter, these emotions that Jesus encountered. What did he do with them? How did he balance this out? I hope what you've heard me say so far is that we are not anti-emotions. We're made to feel these things. What we're asking is, how do I balance this? Because we've seen in our life probably that they can be executed correctly and incorrectly. Last week, we were considering fear. And what I'm going to do just to kind of keep this to where this is digestible and kind of keep the same format, I'm going to do the same approach for each emotion. Last week, we discussed fear. And here's essentially what I was trying to encourage the church with. Fear is not wrong. And positive fear results in you clinging to God, drawing closer to him, and trusting him. But our challenge with fear is that it screams out and it says, something's going to hurt me or I'm going to lose something. And now I'm confronting this sense of a loss of control. And that's that pivotal moment whenever we have that sense of loss of control. Now what do we do? And fear will be appropriate or it'll be executed inappropriately. And what we're going to do with anger is the same thing. I have this anger. Is anger wrong? Anger isn't wrong. It has its time and its place, but it can go south. I gave the illustration, for example, if someone tries to rob you, you may have that flight or fight instinct, right? The adrenaline gets pumping. Fear will say, I'm going to run away from this. But whenever you fight, sometimes you actually have a rush of also anger. Because actually in that moment, what anger does is that it confronts that moment of, I feel a loss of control, and it offers you something, a tool that can do something. And that's why there's this odd thing that happens in our lives that many times when we experience fear, we quickly go to anger. Why? Well, that's why. But please understand, anger can just act on its own. What I said was like, you can go from fear to anger, but that's not the only thing. I want to show you some negative examples of anger like we did with fear, and I'm going to do this with sorrow and guilt as well. But first of all, let's look at some negative examples. You have God who accepts, you remember this, Abel and his sacrifice. He does not accept Cain and his sacrifice. The text says that Cain is angry about this. God confronts him over this. Why has your face fallen? Do you remember that? If you do well, will you not be accepted? But sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must what? You must rule over. And I'll say this, and we got to rule over anger. What was the sin that was crouching at his door? But what happened in this moment? Okay, but what did he become angry about? Well, God has rejected me and my sacrifice, but not my brother. And so my pride is wounded because I think he thinks too highly of himself. He does not humble himself and take the criticism. And he's jealous over his brother. And instead of humbling himself and hearing it, he kills his brother because he can't kill God. You have Joseph. Now here's a man, and I feel for it. Listen, I'm not trying to be overcritical. And would you hear this too? I'm not trying to be overcritical of you. I'm not trying to be overcritical of myself, but I'm also not trying to be so polite that there's no criticism in my own life, yeah? Because again, I'm trying to mold into the image of Jesus, not save my ego. I love Jesus. Jesus is wonderful. Jesus is beautiful. God is wonderful. He's beautiful. I want to be like him. No offense, not like you. I want to be like him. Now, Joseph is betrayed by his own brothers who sell him into literally slavery. And so I understand why years later, whenever he's the right-hand man of Pharaoh, whenever they come to him for help because there's a famine and they come to Egypt, and the text says he dealt harshly and spoke harshly with them. Why do you think he did that? Brethren, because he was angry. Now, Joseph is a beautiful character. By the end of it, remember whenever their dad dies because this is how we think dad's dead, and now Joseph is really going to let his wrath show, and Joseph is mature, and he says, I realize what you've done, you meant it for harm, but God what? Has meant it for good. Whew. But in that moment earlier on, yeah, he's feeling betrayed, and anger can do something about it. Well, and he did. He took advantage of his position. Moses, I feel for him, but here's the reality. He's 80 years old. They've been wandering in the wilderness. He's seen this before. The people are complaining. We don't have anything to drink. This time God says, speak to the rock. And he doesn't speak to the rock, and he hits the rock, and he says, shall Aaron and I bring forth water from this rock? And God says, so what you did is you didn't honor me, and you're just showing unbelief. You did not honor me in the midst of the people. You've disobeyed me. And who brings water from that rock? No. But he was frustrated. Saul chasing David. I mean, literally trying to kill the guy multiple times. Why? Because God has said things through the prophet to Saul, like, I found someone better than you. The women, they saying Saul kills his thousands and David what? His tens of thousands. Oh. Saul, this guy who, by the way, can I remind everyone, whenever God calls him, is hiding behind the baggage. You remember that? But now that he's tasted the position, doesn't want to lose the position. So I'm just going to snuff the guy out. And listen, I love David, but Rod literally referenced this in his class. Here David is, and he won't touch Saul, the guy who's trying to kill him. But Nabal's men were found among David's men for a short period of time, and David showed them mercy and grace and took care of their needs. And David was hoping that Nabal would return the favor and take care of the needs of his men. And Nabal's response is, who's this David guy? I don't know him. There's a lot of guys running away from their masters these days. And David literally, he's like, boys, strap up. And he wasn't playing. And Nabal's wife stops David from doing something unrighteous. Because let me tell you, David, and he would have with ease slaughtered them. There's David. And that's before Bathsheba. Jonah, our people have been persecuted by people like the Assyrians, and you want me to tell them to repent? See, God, I'm angry at you, and I'm angry at them. I'm angry at them because of who they are, and it's odd. You can be angry at God's mercy. But there it is. Boy, there's pride, there's ego, there's nationalism if I've ever seen it. Would you want to be taught the gospel by Jonah? Jesus gives this example because, the religious leaders are criticizing him because he's eating with sinners and tax collectors. And so Jesus gives this parable of the two sons. It's actually about the older son. We fixate on the prodigal son. It's actually, the point of the parable is actually the older brother. See, the younger brother wastes his inheritance, and in this just embarrassing, sinful life, and he comes back home to the father, and the father rejoices. I think I shared this with you, and I just thought about it again, so I'm probably going to mess this up, but I remember one brother saying the younger brother was inside claiming his stake, while the older brother was outside pouting, staking his claim. Yep. and he's angry, and he tells the father, I've never done this to you. I've never been disobedient. And what was the point of Jesus? This self-righteousness that you have, and it comes out anger? Now, I actually, there's so many, I've got this. I want you to be able to go back on your own time and read through these. This one I have to read, because whenever I think about unrighteous anger, I think about this passage in particular, like just almost any time in my personal life that I think about this. Luke chapter 9, verse 51, excuse me. When the days drew near for him to be taken up, so speaking of Christ, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. And he sent messengers ahead of him who went and entered a village of the Samaritans to make preparations for him. Way earlier on in his ministry, he already had the Samaritan woman at the well, and went in, and the people responded favorably towards Jesus. You remember that? But the people did not receive him because his face was set toward Jerusalem, because there was hostility between the Jews and the Samaritans. And he's making his way to Jerusalem, and they just... And when his disciples, James and John, saw it, they said, Lord, do you want us to tell fire to come down from heaven and consume them? Some of your translations may say, as Elijah did. And he turned and rebuked them. Some of your translations put this as a footnote at the bottom. Oh, I hate that, but listen. Here's what he said. You do not know what manner of spirit you are of, for the Son of Man came not to destroy people's lives, but to save them. You don't understand the spirit that's in you. He rebukes them for this. They were just jealous for Jesus, not in this one. Now, I will tell you, Jesus was able to do something that we can't do, really read the heart, and he knew this isn't about me, this is about you. I think what your real issue is that the Samaritans got onto me. I wonder if Jews would have said this if you would have felt so fired up. This isn't about me. You don't understand what's going on inside of you. The apostles towards James and John, there's this awkward deal where these boys send their mama to request something of Jesus. Do you remember? Can my boys, can they what? Can they sit at your what? Right hand and your left. And how do the other apostles take this? Not happy about it. Jealousy and irritation. The audacity? There's 12 of us, but you're the two, aren't you? And that hits the ego too. Well, what about you? Because these apostles would argue about who was the what. Yeah. Peter is hearing Jesus is saying, I'm going to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to be handed over. They're going to kill me. And Peter's not having this, and he rebukes Jesus. And Jesus says, what? You get behind me. Wow. And I'm not criticizing Jesus in that one. So those are, and the Bible is just, it'll blow your mind once you start thinking about how many examples of unrighteous anger are there in the Bible. Wow. Matter of fact, I tried to mirror last week. I was trying to last week I picked one person and I showed the negative example with them and the positive. I couldn't even do that with this one because there's so many negative examples, but not as many positive. It was hard finding a person that could show both the good and the bad. I'm not saying they weren't there, but I couldn't do it. What is anger saying to us? Okay, so anger is saying, something important to me is being blocked or violated. It's being threatened or treated unfairly. Okay? And for me, and I've thought about this for a long time, and this has been good. I've been finally trying to put this down to pen and paper, what's going on? You have a standard. You have a standard. And that standard may or may not be in line with God's standard. But it says things like people should keep their promises, but they didn't. You shouldn't talk to me like that. I needed this to work, and it didn't. That was wrong. I'm being disrespected. I'm exhausted and nobody's helping me. Do these kinds of phrases, do they feel or sound familiar? Anger screams, a standard is broken and I'm going to protect it. I'm going to do something about it. Now, that may be a reality, it may not, but that's how you're feeling. Like, you think I'm losing control, and here it is, and I'm gonna, whether you can or you can't, that's why, like, a mom could even get angry. Why does a mom, she loses her kid, and she loses her kid at the grocery store. Do you ever become angry? Have you had that happen? Something scary happens, and immediately you go to anger? Well, you want to know, because that anger is going to feed something. I got to find this kid. It's weird how it slips in. And so, here's the challenge with this big emotion, and it is a big emotion. So, I want to offer some things for myself that I want to share with you that'll help me deal with anger. Some questions that I think are fair ones to ask. Okay, whose standard is Sean trying to protect? Is it my standard or is it God's standard? Okay? Now, my standard, my standard may be mixed with God, like it's God's standard, that's why it's my standard. Or it could be just something totally, not anything to do with Bible. This is just my standard. And should you be the one acting? So some things happen. Here's just a fair question to ask. If something is to be done, am I the one to do it? Sometimes people will say, hey, mind your own business. And sometimes they just don't like it, like someone needs to be in the business. They're just upset. You know, like a woman beating her child in public. Like beating a child. You know, a woman smacks her kid and punches the kid. Hey, what are you doing? Mind your own business. Or is it like really a situation where just your standard is being broken? They're like, you need to mind your own business. This really is not your business. Okay, and if so, like how far should that go? Does that mean like if I can say, I believe the standard is right, and I believe I should say something or do something. Okay, and what does that look like? How far should that go? See, because the real question is not, am I angry? Oh, because if I'm angry, that's God's upset. No, I don't think that's the question. There's a time and a place for anger, yes? So maybe the better question is, what's at the center of my anger? Or even better, who is at the center of my anger? And is it this person? Is it God's standard? Is it my standard? Is this about God's righteousness? And boy, here's the thing where this one gets me, your brother Sean Briggs. Or is this my ego? Is this about truth and principle? Or is this something personal? And what would God actually have me do? And what becomes complicated about, so I'll pick on the preacher for a moment. Can we do that? Let's do that. Like, I've been in religious debates, let's say, in the past, where if I'm being honest, sometimes I walked away because it got frustrating, right? There's moments of frustration in the debate. And, maybe I won the debate. And what I could tell you is that wasn't personal. That was about truth. But what I want to confess to you is that I won the debate. You know what I mean? What I want to confess to you is that who are you to challenge me? I've been studying longer than you. I'm just trying to be on. Now, I'm hoping that doesn't happen often. I work on that. But like that's my confession. You don't know as much as I do, and I just whooped you up and down. Sucker. And that's ego. It's not about Jesus anymore. No, there are positive examples of anger. I mean, whether it's, look at it. Matter of fact, in the ESV, it talks about Moses having hot anger before Pharaoh. He is trying to warn him, and he will not have it. Or when he comes down and he sees the people with the golden calf, but was that about Moses or was that about God? I don't criticize Moses in those moments. Phinehas kills idolaters. Listen, they had been they're intermingling with the Moabite women and given over to idolatry. And God starts to execute punishment on them. And in the midst, as the people are mourning, one of their own has the audacity to bring a Moabite woman before the whole congregation. And Phinehas says, nope. Phinehas was the grandson of Aaron. And he takes a spear and he runs through the man and the woman. Do you know what God says? He compliments Phinehas for sharing his jealousy. There's a psalm actually that mentions Phinehas. I don't know if you know this. He says that he believed God and it was credited to him as righteousness. You're like, no, Sean, that's Abraham. No, it's Phinehas and Abraham. I know, but it's in there. Because God realized that wasn't personal. That was for me. Samuel rebuked Israel over rejecting God as a king. And he rebuked Saul. He was upset. David says, how long are you going to allow this uncircumcised Philistine to defy the holy God of Israel? And there's trash talking between David and Goliath. Y'all remember that? If it's been a while, but I'm telling you, whenever David is trash talking, his is sounding like this. So, do you know what my God has done for me? And my God will deliver you. My God will. This isn't about my strength. You're not really fighting against me today. And today it ends. Elijah challenges Israel in 1 Kings 18. I mentioned that last week. Because afterwards is where he has that moment of fear. But in 18, he was courageous. And it was behalf of God. Nehemiah, now, although I want to tell you, I'm like, I think Nehemiah 13 is okay. He starts cursing them and like pulling their beards out, I think, though. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I need to scratch that one. Because sometimes you are having to figure out, like, was it okay or was it not okay? But Nehemiah, when he's looking at the injustice among the people, he's really upset about it. And he prays to God, God, remember me and my deeds. John rebuked the Pharisees, you brood of vipers, who warned you from the wrath to come? Jesus said the same thing. Stephen rebuked the Jewish council. You know what Acts chapter 7 is about? Acts chapter 7 is a history of how the Israelite nation had a tendency to always refuse God and reject him. And now what you've done is you have killed the Messiah. You think that there wasn't a little bit of fire in that? And it was returned with fire. They killed him. They stoned him. Peter rebuked Simon. You think that you can purchase the Holy Spirit? Y'all remember that one? He's not happy. Paul confronted Peter. Paul's put it this way, I don't really care who Peter is. What he is means nothing to me. What I know is this, is that he was fine with the Gentile Christians until the Jews would come around. And when the Jews come around, he distanced himself from his brethren. And I rebuked him to his face. And I don't care who he is. It was wrong. That's what we call righteous indignation. What the word is telling us, The Word is telling us that our Lord and Savior experienced anger. Matter of fact, I don't know if you remember it, but there was a few years back where I gave a lesson, what made Jesus glad, and then the next Sunday, what made him mad. There's about a handful of passages that talks about Jesus' indignation. I mean, upset. You want to know what they were? Whenever people turned his Father's house of prayer into a place of business and robbed others. Whenever the people, he says, unless you turn and become like them, the children, you shall not inherit the kingdom of God. If there was anyone ever in the world that wasn't hindered from Jesus, it was these children, yet they were trying to keep them back. It actually made Jesus, isn't that interesting? That made Jesus very upset. The Sabbath failings, I'm asking you, is it okay to do good on the Sabbath? Is it okay to heal a man? I mean, because you're pulling animals out of the ditch. I'm just curious. And they won't answer him? And he is indignant. He is angry about the thing, what they're doing. The scribes and Pharisees, woe to you scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, because of who you are, because of the standard that you're setting, the example, because of what you're putting on the people's shoulders. I am frustrated with you. Lazarus' death. Do you know that Jesus was angered by the consequences of sin and the power of Satan, which he came to destroy? There is a spiritual battle that was ensuing, and that soldier was upset at it. He was upset. Here's what we're saying. Anger isn't wrong. And in fact, anger can produce zeal. It can protect. It can give courage and positive action. In fact, and through this process of dealing with anger, many times God has molded us and taught us self-control. Like, God, how do I step into that appropriate realm of anger and then stop and then step back? Because so many people struggle with this. God has trained us to deal with this, to give it a rhyme and a reason. And so our challenge is to be angry without sinning. And anger becomes sinful when it becomes self-centered and when it lingers, when it goes too far or isn't executed correctly. Like maybe even the thing that you're doing isn't necessarily too far, but maybe the way you went about it or your attitude is wrong. Does that make sense? This is a big one. So, as you can imagine, I've been going through these emotions, these fear and anger, and we're going to get into sorrow next week, and then guilt, and trying to figure out how to articulate this. What is the Bible teaching, and what does this mean for me? And I got this weird OCD thing, so I know, because I'm bringing that up because you would think like, well, the biggest thing that I've dealt with is like fear, anxiety, but that's kind of this weird, really unique thing. If I put that to the side, I don't remember having an issue with fear, but fear has crept up. When I talk about, like, let's say my 5 biggest sins or challenges, fear is in my top 5. I understand why elders cannot have fits of anger. You can't have fits of anger. You can't do that. We can't have you doing that. But really, we as people, we can't have fits of anger. I'm realizing why James says, be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. I feel responsible to say, I feel like I need to say this. I feel like anger right now is kind of like money. The Bible doesn't condemn it, but it does more warning against it than anything. See, this topic, and Rod said that you can hear this what you want to hear. If you're a very non-confrontational person, if you're someone that struggles with confrontation, you like the idea of like, no, anger shouldn't be a deal. But you can be unbalanced. But of course, if you're someone that's confrontational and has an ego problem, you like the ones that will, give the 2 thumbs up on this. And we can't do that. We're not allowed to do that. We have to come in as objective as we can. And say, God, what are you saying? What is your example? And when I look at my life, already I don't have to go back further than 2 weeks. And I can give you at least 2 examples of anger in my life. You know what happened is that anger has crept up in my life. Can I just be honest with you? In preaching and in dealing with people, it baits you to get angry a lot. I'm just being very honest with you. It does 2 things, and it's not the only 2 things that I struggle with when I'm baited, but I'm just going to be honest with you. Because you have people in all walks of life and maturity. I get more frustrated with those that are more mature in the faith than I do those young in the faith. Whenever I look at Jesus and who he got more upset with, I'm more and more going like, yeah, that checks out. But it does 2 things. It can produce an unrighteous anger, and it also can produce that I'm what? Well, I'm awesome. And it has this ego thing. I had someone, I was talking to an older man, and I was venting about some of these things. And you know what he told me? Sean, you're angry. You're angry. And I had to stop, and I said, yeah, no, you're right. He said, I'm afraid this is like going to rob your hope and your joy and your peace if you don't get a hold of this. Like, rob the good things that are going on in your life. And I told him, I said, I needed to hear this. And the thing is that if I were to begin to explain what it was, you may go like, I kind of get it. Yeah, but it's going too far. Or like this week, I was taking my walk, walking around the neighborhood, which, by the way, Bonnie's the master walker. You don't need to know that, but I'm going to brag on her. Bonnie's the master walker. Sorry, Bonnie. You're like, why are you the way you are, Sean? I know. But we've got a cool neighborhood to walk around. But Bonnie will know what I'm talking about. There's an elementary around our school, and there's one major intersection with the cross guards. Man, this week was the last day of school for the kiddos. So parents are trickling out with their kiddos at this main intersection. And as I'm walking and I come to the intersection, there's a car that's been sitting there and another car that pulls up, and they kind of awkwardly wait, and then they eventually go. And as I come to the intersection, I realize what's happening as cars are starting to come in. Guess what this mom's doing at the intersection? Yep, just on her phone. And I'm not going to walk either, because I know that the moment I walk in front, she's going to look up and have that moment of, oops, and she's going to hit me. So I'm sitting there. And she eventually looks up, she sees me, and she says, oh. And then she goes, go ahead. And I went. And she drove by, and I'm looking at her like this. I don't regret that. I don't regret that. Because the other thing is that we're going to make a caricature out of this. No, here's the deal. That wasn't about me. What she's doing is illegal, but more importantly than that, she's going to, I guarantee you, if she hit a kid, you'd be angry. And so when I looked at her, I looked at that, I wanted her to feel shamed. Because I'm hoping that she'll go, what am I doing? Because hopefully she'll get off of her phone and we have a safer neighborhood. I don't take that back. But you know what I didn't do? I didn't hold on to it all day long. I didn't start screaming. I just, you know. Now, but even then, brethren, those are like the safe examples. Because what I've actually hinted at is that I gave you 2 examples that were justified. One that I executed on correctly, and the other one said it started from a good place, but then it went south. I don't want to go into all the many examples where it's not justified. So here's the thing that I do, and I don't know if this will resonate with you. Whenever we talk with anger, everything I've said, you're like, I get it, I agree with you. But see, let me ask you the question. Whenever you fell at anger, is it really in the category, generally speaking, of righteous indignation? Or is it silly, petty, ego-driven junk? That's what it is for me. That is not Jesus-like. And that does not win people to Jesus. That does not draw people to the goodness of the Lord. So then I also have to ask, and then I'm done for this morning. Thank you for your patience. So now I need to ask some very practical questions about Sean Briggs in my life. Do I believe that my wife, my children, my church family, my loved ones, my friends? Do I believe, for example, do I believe that if they had an issue with me, they could come to me? Or do they feel like I would react with anger? I saw that, Braylon. I'm going to get you. I'm just kidding. Do people think that I've got too big of an ego, that they can't talk to me about things? Am I hindering relationships? Am I setting bad examples? Is my family environment unhealthy? Do I think too highly of myself? Here's another one. Am I too critical of people? Is my anger, which can produce ego, am I now too critical of people? Whenever I talk, am I always criticizing things? Oh, and finally, can I end with this one? Do I not forgive people? Can I not forgive people? Because after all, I've got you pegged. I figure out who you are, and you're just not worthy of it. Because the reason why I'm talking about things like fear and anger and sadness and guilt is not because I'm trying to be your psychologist. It's because we are confronted with these things in our Christian walk all the time, and they actually show themselves in very real ways, in friendships, in marriages, in a church. Can anger split a church apart? God bless you all. I'm glad to be your friend. I'm glad to be your brother. I ask your forgiveness for those of you whenever I've lost my cool. And I hope I've said that to you, but I'm okay to say it publicly. Whenever I've not been patient, or I've been too critical, or if I've not set a good example, we're working on this. And I'm just glad that we serve a God who just doesn't struggle in this area, that executes it perfectly. Amen. God bless you. If you need to respond, do so as together we stand and we sing.